The statute which covers theft in the Texas Penal Code is fairly lengthy and contains many terms you need to be familiar with. Part of the reason for this is that previous versions of the Penal Code, just like many other states currently do, identified numerous separate types of theft offenses. Texas law doesn't have the same offense titles you might hear on TV, such as larceny, possession or transfer of stolen property, conversion, fencing, or grand theft auto. Once again, that's all Hollywood. Regardless of what you steal in Texas, almost all possible versions of theft are contained solely under the Penal Code theft statute. The first definition you need to be familiar with is deception. According to the Penal Code, deception includes any of the following: creating or confirming by words or conduct a false impression of law or fact, failing to correct a false impression of law or fact, preventing another from acquiring information likely to affect his judgment in the transaction, selling or otherwise transferring or encumbering property without disclosing a lien, security interest, adverse claim, or other legal impediment to the enjoyment of the property, whether it is or is not valid. Finally, promising performance the actor does not intend to perform or knows will not be performed. The next definition is deprive. Deprive, in terms of the Penal Code, means to withhold property from the owner permanently or for so extended a period of time that a major portion of the value or enjoyment of the property is lost to the owner. To restore property only upon payment of reward or other compensation, or to dispose of property in a manner that makes recovery of the property by the owner unlikely. The definition of effective consent is somewhat similar to the definition found in the sex crimes section. In terms of theft, effective consent means consent by a person legally authorized to act for the owner. Consent is not considered effective if it is induced by deception or coercion, or it is given by a person the actor knows is not legally authorized to act for the owner. For example, a peace officer would be legally authorized to drive a police car owned by the government, but they are not legally authorized to act for the owner in the capacity of selling it as if it was their own car. Consent is not considered effective if it is given by a person who, by reason of youth, mental disease, or defect, or intoxication, is known by the actor to be unable to make reasonable property dispositions. Consent is also not effective if it is given solely to detect the commission of an offense. So, for instance, a defendant caught in a bait car sting can't claim that the police gave him effective consent to take the car by leaving the keys in the ignition and the door unlocked. Finally, the Penal Code states consent is not effective if it is given by a person who, by reason of advanced age, is known by the actor to have a diminished capacity to make informed and rational decisions about the disposition of the property. So, for example, the Penal Code would probably not consider an elderly person with Alzheimer's and dementia who willingly gives a stranger access to his or her bank account as effective consent for the stranger to take the money. The next Penal Code definition is appropriate. Appropriate means to bring about a transfer or purported transfer of title to property, whether to the actor or another. So, for instance, if an actor tricks someone into signing away a title to property, he or she may be said to have appropriated the property, even though they didn't physically steal it. Appropriate also means to acquire or otherwise exercise control over property other than real property. Speaking of property, while it may seem self-explanatory, the Penal Code definition of property includes objects and items other than just stuff you can touch. Property can refer to real property, or land, buildings, or real estate. Property can also mean tangible or intangible personal property, in layman's terms, stuff. Finally, property also includes a document with value, including money. Examples can be titles, deeds, and stock or bond certificates. The next definition is service. As we previously stated, most types of stealing are included in the Penal Code offense of theft. One that is not is theft of service. Service includes labor and professional service, such as professional auto mechanics working on your car. Service also includes telecommunications, public utilities, or transportation service. Service can also refer to lodging, restaurant service, and entertainment. And finally, service means the supply of a motor vehicle or other property for use. The next penal code definition is retail merchandise. Retail merchandise means one or more items offered for sale by a retail store. The next definition is retail theft detector. A retail theft detector is a device used to prevent or detect shoplifting, including any components. The final definition is shielding or deactivation instrument. This includes a shielding or deactivation instrument or an item or tool designed, made, or adapted for the purposes of inhibiting the operation of a retail theft detector, including a foil-lined shopping bag or a device to remove a security tag.
The Texas Penal Code theft statute includes almost all methods of stealing, transferring, or possessing someone else's property without their consent. The Penal Code states a person commits theft when they appropriate property with intent to deprive the owner of the property without effective consent, knowing it was stolen, or believing it was stolen, such as in the case of a law enforcement sting. There are several different industries or items that have been prone to theft. The theft statute in the Penal Code addresses these and imposes requirements on persons who either work or deal with these items. These areas include persons buying used cars, pawn shops, auto salvage, and restricted use pesticides. The first requirements are imposed upon a person who purchases a used car. The Penal Code requires a person who buys a used car to take certain actions. Essentially, if you buy a used car and don't take these actions and it turns out you bought a stolen car, then you can be held criminally liable. The Penal Code states a person who buys a used car without a title and does not report to the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles that they did not receive a title from the seller and or does not file with the county tax assessor not later than the 20th day after the sale, the registration, license, receipt, and title or evidence of the title, then that person is presumed to have known it was stolen. The next category is pawn shops. A pawn shop must take certain actions according to the Penal Code. If they don't take specific actions and end up in possession of stolen property, then the Penal Code states they are presumed to have known it was stolen. The Penal Code states if a pawn shop or loan or cash advance business pays for or loans more than $25 against an item and does not record the name, address, description, or identification of the seller, and record a complete description of the property, including the serial number, and obtained a signed warranty of the right to possess the property, then they are presumed to have known it was stolen. Next, auto salvage, auto junkyards, or related businesses that receive motor vehicles or motor vehicle parts. Similar to pawn shops, these types of businesses must take certain actions according to the Penal Code. If they don't take specific actions and end up in possession of a stolen vehicle or parts from a stolen vehicle, then the Penal Code states they are presumed to have known it was stolen. The Penal Code states an auto salvage or auto junkyard business that receives a motor vehicle or part must maintain an accurate and legible inventory of each car with the date of purchase, who it was purchased from or who delivered it, including the sex, age, address, and driver's license number, the license plate number, and the vehicle identification number. Or, in lieu of those requirements, they must record the name and certificate of the person who dismantled the car from which a part was obtained. If they don't do this, they are presumed to have known the car or the part was stolen. An auto salvage or auto junkyard business that receives a motor vehicle or part must obtain a certificate of authority and a sales receipt or a transfer document or a certificate of title showing the car is not subject to a lien or all liens have been released. And they must immediately remove an unexpired license plate and keep the plate in a secure place. And finally, keep an inventory on a Texas Department of Motor Vehicles form, including the plate number, make, motor number, and VIN. If the business does not take these actions or keep these records and the vehicle or parts end up being stolen, then they are presumed to have known it and can be held criminally liable. Certain agricultural chemicals can be harmful in that they may be used to create powerful improvised explosive devices or be used to manufacture illegal substances. The Penal Code states if a person buying a restricted use pesticide or state limited use pesticide or a compound, mixture, or preparation from a source other than a licensed retailer and they do not record the name, address, and physical description of the seller, and or fail to record the amount and type of substance and or obtain a signed warranty of the right to possess the property, then they are presumed to have known it was stolen. It should come as no surprise that the Penal Code states it is not a defense to theft, that the offense occurred as a result of an undercover sting, including use of an undercover officer, that the actor was provided facility by law enforcement as part of an undercover sting, or that the actor was solicited or encouraged by an undercover officer to commit the offense. Theft is graded primarily by the amount of the loss, though there are other specifications which include theft of livestock, firearms, and metals. This graphic shows felonies of the first degree through state jail felonies. Pause the screencast to review the chart. This chart includes A misdemeanor through C misdemeanor theft. In addition to the previous charts, the Penal Code states theft is enhanced to the next level. So for instance, a B misdemeanor becomes an A misdemeanor if committed by a public servant due to their status as a public servant, while in or due to a contractual relationship with the government, against an elderly victim, against a nonprofit organization, by a Medicare provider, or during the offense the actor intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly caused a fire alarm exit to sound or activate, or deactivated or prevented a fire alarm or retail theft detector from sounding, or used a shielding or deactivation instrument to prevent the detection of the offense.
Most types of stealing property are covered under the Texas Penal Code statute of theft. Stealing services, such as a restaurant meal, use of a hotel room, or use of a rental car fall under a different statute, theft of service. There are four main ways in general to commit theft of service. The first two are fairly straightforward. First, the Penal Code states a person commits theft of service if he or she, with intent to avoid payment for service, intentionally or knowingly secures performance of the service by deception, threat, or false token. So for instance, if you dine and dash or walk a tab, in other words, sit down and eat a meal or have a few drinks and then leave without paying, you've committed theft of service. Second, a person commits theft of service if the person has control over services of another to which the actor is not entitled and diverts the services to the actor's benefit or to the benefit of another. So an example might be an employee of a company that provides a service over the internet, signing you or themselves up for a free service without authorization from the company. The third and fourth types bear a little explanation. Theft of service may also be committed by securing the performance of a service by agreeing to provide compensation and failing to make payment afterwards. So for instance, a contractor rents a forklift under a rental agreement, uses it at a job site, and returns it afterwards, but fails to make payment upon return. So the rental company has their property, but not their money. In the final type of theft of service, a person commits this offense if they have control of personal property under a rental agreement and keep property beyond the rental period. So for instance, these spring breakers have lawfully rented a jet ski and paid up front, but kept it past when it was due back to the marina. The rental company has their money, but they don't have their property back. In the first two types of theft of service, for instance the dine and dash example and the diversion of services example, the elements of the offense generally have been satisfied once you demonstrate intent to avoid payment. The Penal Code states intent to avoid payment is presumed if a person leaves without paying from a hotel, campground, RV park, restaurant, or comparable establishments. So if you walk a tab or leave without paying your room service bill, then you have committed theft of service. Again, for the second two categories, it's a little bit more complicated since it wouldn't generally be reasonable to charge someone with a criminal offense if they've kept a rental car 10 minutes past when it was due back or were a few hours late paying for a jet ski after renting it. Take a look at this chart, which should help you keep it all straight in your head. We'll talk about each category. Remember our example of the contractor who rented the forklift and brought it back, but didn't pay the fee. In this case, the rental company has their property, in this case the forklift, but doesn't have their money. Before a charge of theft of service can be prosecuted, the business that rented the property is required by the Penal Code to send notice, essentially a letter that says, "Give us our property back." Notice is presumed to have been received within 5 days after being sent. The Penal Code states intent to avoid payment is presumed if the actor fails to make payment after receiving a 10-day notice, or the actor returns rented property after expiration of the rental agreement but does not pay after receiving a 10-day notice. Next, recall our spring breakers who paid for their jet ski but didn't bring it back. In this case, the rental company has their money but doesn't have their property. Just as before the spring breakers can be prosecuted for theft of service, the company must send written notice. Also, just as before, it's presumed to have been received within 5 days of being sent. The renter must return the property within 5 days after receiving a notice if property is valued at less than $2,500. Within 3 days after receiving a notice if the property is valued at more than $2,500 but less than $10,000, or within 2 days after receiving a notice if the property is valued at more than $10,000. Finally, in what is sort of a quasi-separate fifth category, under certain rent-to-own contracts, a renter has 5 days to return property after having received notice and having made 3 or less payments. Written notice must be sent to the actor's mailing address on the rental or service agreement and must be sent by registered or certified mail with return receipt requested or by commercial delivery service. The Penal Code further indicates if payments for rental property were to be made on a periodic basis, the intent to avoid payment may be formed at any time during or before a pay period, and the partial payment of wages alone is not enough to negate the intent to avoid payment. If the police are taking a stolen car report from a rental agency, the report must indicate the rental company sent notice. And finally, it is a defense to prosecution to theft of service. The actor used a post-dated check to pay, and the payee attempted to cash the check before the posted date. Similar to theft, the level of a theft of service offense depends upon the value of the service stolen, the rental fee not paid, or the rental property not returned. While personal checks don't seem to be used quite as much as they once were, it is possible that an actor could steal or effectively steal property by exchanging the property for a check that bounces, or is rejected at the bank for not having any money in the account at the bank. In other words, the victim tries to cash the check and is unable to. In this instance, the actor has the victim's property but hasn't truly paid for it. Just like there are several sets of the elements of the offense of theft of service, there's 4 specific sets of elements that must be met in order for an actor to be charged with theft by check. We'll take a look at each of them. First, according to the Texas Penal Code, it is prima facie evidence or evidence on his face for theft by check or sight order, except for post-dated checks, if the actor had no account with the bank at the time. It is also prima facie evidence the check was presented within 30 days of being written and the check bounced or was unable to be cashed due to insufficient funds and the actor did not pay the money within 10 days of receiving a notice from the victim. According to the Penal Code, notice is sent by first-class mail with an affidavit of service or must be sent by registered or certified mail with return receipt requested. The notice must be sent to the address on the check or from the bank records or from other records and contain a certain statement that can be found in the Penal Code. Notice sent in this manner is presumed to have been received no later than 5 days after being sent. Next, theft by check is presumed if the actor obtained property and the actor stopped payment on the check. In other words, the actor contacted the bank and told them not to cash the check. Finally, theft by check is presumed if the actor obtained property and the check was presented within 30 days of being written, the check bounced, the actor did not pay within 10 days of receiving notice, or the actor didn't return the property within 10 days of receiving notice. So let's review. The first presumption for theft by check is if the victim goes to cash it and the actor had no account with the bank at the time. The next presumption is if the victim goes to cash the check within 30 days and the check bounces. In this case, for the presumption to be fulfilled, the victim must send notice to the actor and the actor must pay the amount within 10 days of receiving the letter. If the actor doesn't, the presumption is fulfilled. The next presumption is if the actor stops payment on the check. In other words, the actor contacts the bank after they hand over the check and tell the bank not to pay it. The final presumption is if the victim goes to cash the check within 30 days, the check bounces, the victim sends notice, and the actor does not pay or return the property within 10 days of receiving this notice.
There is a distinct difference between a stranger breaking out the window and stealing your car and a family member or friend who has previously had permission to drive your car, taking your keys and driving somewhere without your permission. The first is theft. The second is the Texas Penal Code offense of unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. The Penal Code states a person who intentionally or knowingly operates another's boat, airplane, or motor-propelled vehicle without the owner's effective consent has committed unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, sometimes shortened to UUMV. This offense seems to happen a lot and might better be termed operating without permission. Citizens who learn most of their criminal law from television and the movies often call Texas law enforcement agencies claiming their husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, son, or daughter has stolen their vehicle and they want him or her charged with theft. Again, the Penal Code recognizes a distinct difference between a stranger breaking your window and stealing your car and an irresponsible household member going on a joyride. The determining factor in whether or not it's theft versus UUMV may be whether or not the operator has previously had permission to drive the vehicle or their access to keys to the car. In some instances, family members or friends drop the complaint after the vehicle is returned. If charges do end up being filed, all UUMV offenses are state jail felonies.
Section 31.09 and 31.10 of the Texas Penal Code are similar to statutes found in Chapter 28 concerning the value of property damaged in offenses like criminal mischief, graffiti, and interference with railroad property. Section 31.09 and 31.10 deal with property involved in theft, however. Just like the statutes in Chapter 28, though, they don't describe offenses, but rather detail how to do the math when determining the offense levels for property crimes. First, according to the Penal Code, when amounts are obtained in violation of this chapter pursuant to one scheme or continuing course of conduct, whether from the same or several sources, the conduct may be considered as one offense, and the amounts aggregated in determining the grade of the offense. So in plain language, a stolen item worth $75 would normally grade as a C misdemeanor under the standard value ladder. If a person steals two of these same items as part of the same scheme of conduct or during the same criminal episode, essentially at the same time or as part of the same crime, the Penal Code says the amounts may be added together to total $150 and therefore charged as a B misdemeanor. Finally, very similar to what we've encountered in Chapter 28, the Penal Code states it is not a defense to prosecution to a criminal offense that an actor has an interest in property stolen if another person has an interest the actor is not entitled to infringe. So in plain language, it's not against the law to steal your own property, for lack of a better characterization, unless someone else has a monetary interest in the property. In that case, it might be against the law. Keep in mind, however, just as we discussed in Chapter 28, practically speaking, this concept can get very complicated and may stray into the realm of civil law, particularly in the case of property subject to family relationships, marriages, and dating relationships. Remember, this is statutory guidance more or less, so it needs to be informed by case law and the opinion of an attorney. High-value items often have serial numbers engraved on them to aid in locating them should they be stolen. The Texas Penal Code offense of tampering with identification numbers attempts to prevent a person from removing these sorts of numbers to hamper efforts in recovering stolen property. The Penal Code states an offense is committed by a person who intentionally or knowingly removes, alters, or obliterates the serial number or other permanent identification marking on tangible personal property. The offense is also committed when a person intentionally or knowingly possesses, sells, or offers for sale tangible personal property and the person knows the serial number or permanent identification marking has been removed or altered, or a reasonable person would have known the serial number or permanent identification markings have been removed or altered. All offenses of tampering with identification numbers are A misdemeanors. There are affirmative defenses to tampering with identification numbers, and one in particular is very, very important. It is an affirmative defense the actor owns the property or was acting with consent of the owner. So this essentially means an owner of property may remove the serial numbers from his or her own property. It is also an affirmative defense if the actor was a peace officer acting in the scope of duties, a Texas DMV employee for vehicle identification numbers acting in the scope of duties, or finally, was in full compliance with Texas DMV rules for vehicle identification numbers. Entertainment technology has come a long way since the 1990s when the Texas legislature passed several laws related to theft of cable television. We'll talk about 3 separate offenses in this screencast. First, under the Penal Code offense of theft of or tampering with multi-channel video or information services, a person commits an offense when, without authorization, he or she intentionally or knowingly makes a connection to another device with an illegal connection, tampers with a cable television device, or tampers with a device with an illegal connection. Devices which may be included in the elements of this offense include a cable, wire, or other component of a television set, videotape recorder, or other receiver that is attached to a multi-channel video or information services system. 2 previous non-remuneration convictions under this statute, in other words, committing the offense in order to get free cable for yourself or as a favor for a friend, are A misdemeanors. 2 previous remuneration convictions in which someone else is paying you to make an illegal connection are also A misdemeanors, and a conviction under this statute requires a minimum fine of $2,000 and a maximum of 180 days in jail. All other remuneration offenses are A misdemeanors. 1 previous non-remuneration conviction is a B misdemeanor, and all other non-remuneration offenses are C misdemeanors. The next offense, manufacture, distribution, or advertisement of multi-channel video or information services, is committed when an actor, for remuneration, so again, someone else is paying the actor to commit the offense, intentionally or knowingly manufactures, assembles, modifies, imports, exports, distributes, advertises, or offers for sale a method for stealing cable or satellite television. All offenses under this section are A misdemeanors. Again, this offense relies on the actor receiving payment for facilitating theft of cable in one way or another. There is no offense against posting how to steal cable online as depicted here. Finally, a person commits the offense of sale or lease of multi-channel video or information services device if he or she intentionally or knowingly sells or leases a kit or part of a system to steal cable or satellite. All offenses under this statute are also A misdemeanors. The Texas Penal Code offense of organized retail theft was intended for schemes with sophistication and coordination beyond the average garden variety shoplifter. At one extreme, this law is intended for organized bands of thieves who roam throughout the U.S., committing shoplifting on a very large scale. At the other end of the spectrum, it may also be applied to pairs of shoplifters who attempt to steal from stores and businesses. According to the Penal Code, a person commits organized retail theft when they intentionally conduct, promote, or facilitate an activity in which the person receives, possesses, conceals, stores, barters, sells, or disposes of stolen retail merchandise or merchandise represented as being stolen. Organized retail theft is graded on the total value of the property stolen. Pause the screencast to review the chart. Similar to the Penal Code offense of theft, this offense is enhanced to the next level if the person organized, supervised, financed, or managed at least one other person. Or during the offense, the actor caused a fire alarm exit to sound or activate, deactivated or prevented a fire alarm or retail theft detector from sounding, or used a shielding or deactivation instrument to prevent the detection of the offense. Shoplifters come up with many different tricks to try to defeat loss prevention and asset protection professionals. This screencast covers the Texas Penal Code statute of possession, manufacture, or distribution of certain instruments used to commit retail theft. A person who, with intent to commit theft, commits this offense if they possess a shielding or deactivation instrument, or knowingly manufactures, sells, offers for sale or distribution a shielding or deactivation instrument. All offenses under this section are A misdemeanors. Keep in mind, according to Penal Code Section 31.01, shielding or deactivation instrument means any item or tool designed, made, or adapted for the purpose of preventing the detection of stolen merchandise by retail theft detectors. The term includes a metal-lined or foil-lined shopping bag and any item used to remove a security tag affixed to retail merchandise. Obviously, some common sense and discretion must come into play with this statute. Foil-lined shopping bags to keep food hot or cold are extremely common in places like grocery stores. They are a bit more suspicious, however, in other places such as a mall department store, where a majority of items have anti-theft tags and no food, hot or cold, is sold. Ultimately, though, a judge or jury is unlikely to convict a person simply for possessing a foil-lined shopping bag in a grocery store or even a screwdriver in a clothing store, and a peace officer or prosecutor pursuing such a charge may have some explaining to do. The totality of the circumstances should always be taken into consideration. The Texas Penal Code offense of unauthorized acquisition or transfer of certain financial information was created in response to thieves using radio frequency identification or RFID skimming devices to steal credit or debit card information from victims' wallets and purses without the card ever leaving the victim's possession. This offense is committed when an actor, knowing he or she is not entitled to obtain or possess the financial information, obtains a financial site order or payment card information of another by use of an electronic device. This offense is a B misdemeanor. This offense is also committed when a person transfers to another the information obtained by an electronic device. This offense is an A misdemeanor. According to the Penal Code, if conduct constitutes an offense under this section and another section of the Penal Code, the actor may be prosecuted under this section or the other. While any tangible thing that can be stolen in Texas may be charged under Penal Code Section 31.03 theft, the legislature passed several specialty laws starting with the 84th session that are sometimes called boutique laws, since they apply to very specific items. In this screencast, we'll discuss two of these, cargo theft and theft of petroleum product. First, under the offense of cargo theft, cargo means a commercial shipment of freight moving in commerce, and moving in commerce means at any point between the point of origin and final destination. Think of the context for cargo theft this way. Why steal one of something when you could steal an entire truckload of it? According to the Penal Code, a person commits cargo theft when they knowingly or intentionally conduct, promote, or facilitate an activity in which the person receives, possesses, conceals, stores, barters, sells, abandons, or disposes of stolen cargo, or cargo represented as being stolen. Cargo theft is also committed by a person who is employed as a driver and who knowingly or unintentionally fails to deliver part of the cargo to the known point of destination, or causes the seal to be broken on the shipping container or vehicle. Cargo theft is graded by the cost of property stolen, which may include the truck itself. This graphic shows felonies of the first degree through third degree, which are the only offenses specified for this offense. Note, this ladder is not the standard value ladder you're used to seeing. It is a cargo theft ladder and has heavier penalties than the regular theft statute. So under certain circumstances, for instance, a theft of cargo worth $140,000, the offense would be a felony of the second degree under the cargo theft ladder, but only a felony of the third degree if charged under the regular theft statute. Pause the screencast to review the chart. Cargo theft is enhanced to the next level if the defendant organized, supervised, financed, or managed at least one other person. It is not a defense that the offense occurred as a result of an undercover sting, including use of an undercover officer. That the actor was provided a facility by law enforcement as part of an undercover sting, or that the actor was solicited or encouraged by an undercover officer to commit the offense. The next specialty offense is theft of petroleum product. For the purposes of this offense, petroleum product means crude oil, natural gas, or condensate. A person commits this offense if the person unlawfully appropriates a petroleum product with intent to deprive the owner of the petroleum product by possessing, removing, delivering, receiving, purchasing, selling, moving, concealing, or transporting the petroleum product, or making or causing a connection to be made with, or drilling or tapping, or causing a hole to be drilled or tapped in a pipe, pipeline, or tank used to store or transport a petroleum product. The Penal Code further states, appropriation of a petroleum product is unlawful if it is without the owner's effective consent. Theft of petroleum is graded by the cost of the product stolen. This graphic shows felonies of the first degree through state jail felonies, which are the only levels specified for this offense.